her reaction wasn't great. She was like, Dave, I'll read it because I love you. And when she read it, it was all smudged with red ink everywhere. And I come back 3 hours later and her response was, Dave, because I love you, I've gone through this. Its first few pages are really bad. Couldn't make sense of what you're trying to say, even though you said that you have been able to articulate and you can tell me. But once I go past 8th page or 9th page, there is something really important that you are saying. And I think you should say it. I believe you should continue this path. However, it's not going to be an easy walk. And for sure it wasn't, because I started crying. And if you wanted to see a man cry and whole lot of pity and shame, it was all there in that moment, because I felt that here I am, couple of $100,000 paycheck, life's great, everything's great, and I'm essentially taking every fabric of our life that feels great, and I'm tearing this apart as a husband, and she's supporting me, and she thinks I know what I need to do or what I should be doing, and I have absolutely no idea.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Melting Pot episode. My guest today is very interesting. So his name is Dave Chauhan. Dave is the author of Captainsetsail, which is a practical guide for navigating leadership's rough seas and oceans as well. So we explore how to find your beacon, lead with heart and steel, and turn life's storms into moments of growth. So thank you so much for joining me today, Dave.
Thank you, Payal. I'm glad to be here. It's an honor to be sharing my thoughts and my story with you and your audience.
Thank you very much. And just to add here that Dave is talking to me from Melbourne, and I am at the moment in Singapore. So, Dave, before you became an author and you became like a leadership consultant, who were you on those oily factory floors that you keep mentioning? What did those early experiences teach you about people and also about problem solving?
To be honest, Pyle, I am and I was an everyday Joe. My story is as ordinary as anybody else's story is. I started my career in construction industry. I finished my mechanical engineering, and in pursuit of finding something meaningful and finding something interesting, I had the opportunity to join a project management consulting company based out of US. And I took that opportunity despite the fact I had the traditional route of joining automobile company at the time. And I did only because I wanted to pursue something different. And I was curious about project management industry, which was at its very nascent stage back then. From there, this project management field gave me this opportunity to then go and work in different fields. It started from construction industry, but then I ended up joining manufacturing. I had opportunity to work on global projects with supply chain projects, manufacturing projects. I had aviation as part of those projects that I was doing, aerospace and a couple of defense component that we were looking at the time. And that's what opened this opportunity for me to go out and venture out. What I felt throughout my life during that early constructive years of my career was that for me, it's all about gaining technical skills so I can keep learning and keep climbing that corporate ladder as you do. And for me, that was how I thought leadership would be shaped. And for me, this is how I will get to what I want to do in my life. But during all these years, I often found myself in those moments where I had to listen to my gut, and my gut was telling something's not right. But as you do, you always give yourself a reason, you always give yourself an opportunity to move on. And there's a bill, there's a bill, there are bills to pay, or there is a promotion waiting for you from the other side, or there's a career goal, and that you just keep moving. Fast forward, last year, I got to the point where I started questioning everything. And in that moment of reflection, I took that leap of faith. I gathered enough courage to say, this is enough. Now I have seen from being a follower all the way to corporate leader how teams are shaped and formed. I just don't agree with how leadership is pursued and formed in the corporate world and in the modern world. And that was my out. That's when I felt I have to be honest with my own identity, who I am. And I started my journey of pursuing my purpose, which I had no idea about at the time. I did
You
not
didn't
do
really
this all
know,
knowing.
yeah, you didn't know what your purpose was.
Absolutely. I had no idea what I would be doing
So
and
that's
where.
when so that's actually when you realize that the old maps just don't work for you anymore.
It was long after I had these principles in my life, these fundamental principles, and one of these principles was the theory of good enough plans, where you essentially don't need to carve out the entire journey before you start something. So last year, I was about to finish my MBA from University of Illinois, which is public Ivy League university, and the conversations were happening around me in terms of what's next. As
Yeah.
my batchmates, my colleagues, they were all talking about next venture, next join the big fours, and or be a venture capitalist or start a new company. My pivotal question was, but I did not start my MBA because I wanted to add another zero or another title to my name. And that question, that constant pragmatic reflection of what I really wanted, got me to the point where, okay, this is what I not don't want. So the journey started not from what I wanted, the journey started from who I am not.
Correct.
And from that, the story of, okay, if this is not who I am, then let's get on to the next one. Okay, I am not this either. So, by theory, if you look at it, if you start striking out who you are not and what's not your purpose, practically you're getting one step closer to your purpose
Correct.
without
Because
knowing
you're
that you are.
eliminating. Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Exactly, you're
Yeah. Yeah.
eliminating those wrong choices.
Yeah.
And that's how it all started for me. Last year, about this time, if you would have asked me that would I ever write a book, would I be doing what I'm doing right now? It wouldn't have been my wildest dreams. I call myself an accidental author for that reason. I call myself that if I am supposed to do what I'm supposed to do today, what I'm doing right now, I know that I'm not the best option. But it came out of from that moment and from that point where I felt if I won't talk about this stuff, I would lose my own identity. And in Viktor Frankl's words, a man or a human can die in two ways. One is the physical death, but the other death is far more painful when you lose your purpose in life. And I wasn't willing and to die this young in the proverbial form. I made that leap, and here I am today speaking with you.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it's absolutely right that there has to be the purpose is through the process of elimination because, and I think that's a very good approach to say that, okay, what is it that I don't want to be? And so there's a lot of reflection there. And then once you're able to strike off what you don't want to be, then you're getting closer and closer to your purpose. Yeah, no, I think that's a very important lesson for a lot of people who are probably in a stage that you were last year. And I think this whole method of reflection hopefully will help some of the listeners there who are completely in a state of, yeah, I wanted to ask you, people move from like a panic state or a paralysis. It's something I don't know whether you would refer to what you felt last year as a panic state or a paralysis, but how like you get into this purposeful action when the path isn't very clear. So just a little, I know you've mentioned what you started eliminating, but if you could elaborate a little bit more on the process of elimination.
Sure. From face value, what I'm about to share, your audience will say, oh, that's obvious. That's so simple. And I often say there's a difference between what's easy and what's simple. Simple sometimes cannot be easy because it's about consistency. It's about continuing even something, if something is simple, continuing it when it gets tough and hard. So from that angle, My simple process was reflection and journaling. I have been, for last 10 years or so, I have been lucky with finding mentors who have always almost forced upon me to reflect. Some of them call this practice of silent reflection. Every time we'll sit down, we have a conversation like you and I, we're having a conversation. Then immediately once conversation is done, I'll sit down and I'll just jot down. I'll just let my brain do a huge dumping exercise of what I'm going through, not trying to make meaning out of it, just let it go out and the meaning will come out later. Just let my brain synthesize and process what's happening. So for me, when I made this move about gathering enough courage that my corporate career seems to be getting every time to the same point where I find myself in a situation where I don't agree with management, or I had questioned myself all through my life that management who is doing this thing when I was a follower must be right, something that I don't understand. But you get to a point where you are the management.
Right.
Then you start asking yourself, but wait a minute, why am I still making these decisions? Then you look at shareholder value, investors, KPIs, targets. You have to make these decisions that you don't agree with because now you're the management and now you understand that why. And you essentially start layering it down that it's not about leaders who are bad. It's the culture, the definition of leadership, what we have coined and accepted as society is essentially defunct and it's full of faults. So when I had this realization, like I said, I had decided that this is not who I am and I need to talk about it. I need to go away. But I didn't know how should I do it. So I started reflecting and I started journaling all this that I was going through. So back last year in December, I was profusely writing, perhaps I don't know how many words a day. I will just every moment, every time where I'll have a thought, I'll sit down and I'll start writing. And I don't use notebook and pencil anymore, but I still do my tablets. So I still do the writing part, not the typing part, the writing part. And sometimes it's so difficult because even I struggle to understand my own handwriting. So fast forward in by January, I had written all this stuff, and now I'm transcribing this stuff in form of what I started thinking was, oh, I've written all this stuff. I might start a blog. I might start putting this stuff out there on LinkedIn or whatnot. Perhaps nobody will ever read, but in my way, I'm doing something that I felt was right. So January comes, Sari, my wife, she's in a leadership role at a school. She resumes her school after holidays, after Christmas break. And a week's gone by and she comes back on Thursday afternoon and she's a little bit frustrated that he's the homestay husband who is trying to figure out purpose for the last 3 months or so. But the dinner's not ready, the dog hasn't gone out for a walk, and she almost reluctantly asked me that I'm getting frustrated. What's happening in your life? Are you at a point where you need help? Or do you need to go out with your mates? And like here in Australia, we go for camping, and I often do it with my friends. And she was like, do you need to go out with boys and just let it out and think and process what's happening? Maybe when you go out with your mates, you get some direction. And I sheepishly just said, hey, I think I might have written a book. And her response wasn't great. She was angry. She almost felt mid-age crisis, husband probably going through these rhythms and blues, and she thought that potentially there are cracks in our relationship. I think she panicked, and I was like, none of that stuff's happening. I finally have been able to articulate and say what I have been trying to say for the last so many years. I can put it down in few words now, and I can say that what I've been trying to explain, looking for leaders or looking for purpose throughout my life, and finally I've gotten to a point where I can say it. To my naive mind, I thought I had written a book, and when I showed this book to her, this manuscript to her, which was the first revision, her reaction wasn't great. She was like, Dave, I'll read it because I love you. And when she read it, it was all smudged with red ink everywhere. And I come back 3 hours later, and her response was, Dave, because I love you, I've gone through this. Its first few pages are really bad. Couldn't make sense of what you're trying to say, even though you said that you have been able to articulate and you can tell me. But once I go past 8th page or 9th page, there is something really important that you are saying. And I think you should say it. I believe you should continue this path. However, it's not going to be an easy walk. And for sure, it wasn't, because I started crying. And if you wanted to see a man cry and all whole lot of pity and shame, it was all there in that moment, because I felt that here I am, couple $100,000 paycheck, life's great, everything's great, and I'm essentially taking every fabric of our life that feels great, and I'm tearing this apart as a husband, and she's supporting me, and she thinks I know what I need to do or what I should be doing, and I have absolutely no idea. So I started crying, and from that point, she was like, "We are in this together. We have managed thus far paying bills. 4 months gone. We can drag this as long as we need to. If you're willing to pursue this, if this is what you really need, it's not going to get any easier from this point. It will keep getting on harder and harder. And if this is the moment in time that you need to really, you're serious about what you have written, you everything, every word that you have said, if you really believe in, then you need to act on it." And my response was yes, because everything that I've gathered this far in my life, if those resources, and by resources, I'm not saying just money, I'm saying money, time, skills, people, network, everything that I've
Experiences.
gathered,
Yeah. Yeah.
everything, my whole story, if it has gotten me to this point, and if I don't act on it, then what's it worth for? So we started venturing out, reaching out to all these amazing editors from all across the globe. And one gentleman came back, apart from others as well, but this one gentleman from New York, he came back and he gave us everything that we needed to hear, because we sent them this little copy of manuscript to what we were talking about, what book was about, and all that. And all of them came back with these amazing raving reviews that for almost a decade we haven't seen this kind of work out in the market. And this is pretty amazing. And these were the people who have had worked with the likes of Penguin Random House and Simon Schuster and all these big names, as you would expect, the kind of caliber to that we were seeking. And he came back, and his response, apart from everything, like I said, you wanted to hear from an editor, his response was, "I just want to put my name on this work."
Wow.
And we said, "Yep, Michael, you're the one. We want to work with you." So from there, like I said, to my naive mind, a tiny 7,000 words printed on the biggest font as you can on A4 sheet was a book. That's where the discovery and the real journey started of what became a book. 14, 15 revisions later, another 6, 7 months later, we had designers, everybody was working together, and it became a book. And here we are. I had no idea about what comes next from the book. And one after another, it's a story now that when you are absolutely serious and passionate for something, almost world starts to conspire to connect you with all
Towards,
these
yeah,
incredible
towards,
forces.
yeah, actually making it happen. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's again, it's the drive, it's the single-minded and the focused approach, because that's what you really are driven to do. Then you're absolutely right that somehow doors just open for you. No, I completely agree with that point of view. I want to know why the title of the book, because it's interesting because it's Captain Set Sail. So what comes to my mind is storm. A captain is someone who would be very, obviously, he needs to navigate the ship to get to its final destination. So it sails. There can be stormy times. So are you the captain who's trying to navigate and who's trying to, through your experiences, trying to get others who are struggling at this point in time, who are leaders, but who are going through, like I mentioned earlier, panic paralysis? Is this your way of trying to help and mentor people through your book?
Nobody has asked me the question with this with the level of depth, because everyone thinks title is a title and what's in the book is important. but title is important.
Of course.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about for the book. For the
Yeah.
book, there is a deep thought process that went through within the team. We had roughly 60 titles listed when we started going through the process. We came up with this brainstorming exercise to go through what possible titles can we delegate to the book. And the final title, to cut the story short, the final title came from Michael, from our editor. The thought process that went into picking this title was the book talks about essentially the fundamental principle of leadership, which I call nautical leadership model. And by the virtue of nautical leadership model, it's analogy of how I define leadership. Again, you can put that analogy in your ways. I am a stories man, and I have made sense of my world through analogies my whole life. When I started reflecting back on my learnings of what I think good leadership is, the kind of leadership world needs, I started going back to every story that I've read, every story that inspired me, and every book that made sense to me, and really define those leadership principles and connect them to how it shapes humanity and the modern leadership. So, from that sense, there are a lot of stories that come from nautical world, and I've taken those stories and I've put those stories in the book. And apart from those stories, there are a lot of stories from our political world, from typical traditional bread and butter corporate world that we have taken into the story, and we have put this research on it to understand how leadership happens when it happens, what really shapes
Yeah.
those decisions.
So it's
But
important
when
to
we
give
think
context. It's important to give
that's
context. Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
absolutely right. And leadership never happens in that one moment. Leadership never happens when you get somewhere. Leadership never happens when you wear a title or when you get in a boardroom, and that's when leadership starts. Leadership happens all the time throughout human life. Anthropologically, there is a huge layer of my work that now I've imposed on how I think from my belief system is that leadership really became a human virtue or became part of our human society. How we see leadership today, how leadership will potentially be in the future. So I talk about in the book. But to come back to your question, why Captainsetsail? If we look at it from the perspective of ships and sailors when they were making these amazing, incredible voyages in the seas that were unknown at the time, there were no maps, or there were no reliable maps. There were no reliable seafaring techniques. There were no hardcore GPS satellites to guide these incredible people who were on these journeys. And I know a lot of these journeys did bring a lot of pain and trauma to so many societies. So, barring that fact for now, if we pause that thought, if we come back to when these journeys were happening, there were incredible journeys and sailors and captains and navigators who were successful repeatedly, one after another. And then there were others who failed on their very first voyage, very first journey. It wasn't because of the better ship they had. It wasn't because of the better instruments, better maps they had. It was the chemistry that was happening within the confinements of the ship and the leadership virtues that were being played by the followers and the leaders in the crew that defined the success or failure of that voyage. And that's the interesting part. So from that analogy, if you look at it at humanity, leadership is essentially something that resonates with walking into this untamed territory and uncertain waters. It just resonates. The same principles when we apply to the modern leadership, you would see that it is not about who's got massive resources. It's not about who's got the most advanced AI or technology or skills or capital. It has always been between the crew and the captain that defines what will happen as an outcome of that voyage. Without oversimplifying, leadership is so many things. Leadership is charisma, leadership is rallying the people, leadership is about skills, leadership is so many things. What my theory basically distills down to the concept is that you could have everything and anything. But if you don't have these basic three elements of what I call nautical leadership model, leadership or the outcomes are potentially going to be doomed, or they are not going to be very favorable, very healthy outcomes in that situation or in that scenario. So that's why Captainsetsail.
Okay, wow. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And the way you've explained it, it makes perfect sense to have a title like that for your book. No, that's incredible. And yeah, you're so right that leadership has it's not just about, okay, a title that I'm the CEO or I am middle management and I have a team of X number of people below me. It's the connection, it's empathy, it's far more, it's the understanding of the people that you're actually dealing with, it's the culture, it's so many multiple things which actually bring it all together. And that's when you can identify a good leader from a leader who's in a paralysis state. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a title that can really stick. And it's a title that people would look at and say, okay, in the context of leadership, how does this work? So I'm curious and I would definitely want to read the book. So I think, no, that's incredible. I'm sure this book is going to go far. If you could leave every listener with one compass point to guide their next decision, what would it be?
I call it connection with purpose. And connection with purpose starts from basic understanding of what your values are as a human. You can't find your purpose unless you know your own values. And people often think that I am connected with my purpose or I'm connecting with my values. My usual response is if you are, put yourself through a simple test that if your purpose or your values are confined or are essentially limited to yourself or very few people around you, then quite possible there might be pseudo values and pseudo purpose. It might give you a sense of that you have purpose or values in life, but they might not be the real values or real purpose. As humans, it is our obligation and it's our duty to connect with purpose. It's a waste of human potential when so many humans never reach and connect with their purpose through their whole lives. And the story that comes to my mind is when we talk about Nobel Prizes, because Nobel Prizes are being announced everywhere right now. How did Nobel Prize start? It was Alfred Nobel who
Yeah.
read his own obituary in a newspaper, which was a misprint because his brother had died and
Yeah.
somebody mistook it as him dying.
Yeah.
And at the time, there were no telephones, no fax machines. So next morning, he gets up and he looks at the newspaper, and somebody has written his death announcement, his obituary, that Alfred Nobel, and not in exactly the same way, but in exaggerated way, it was the merchant of death has died. And in that moment, and this is not being me being morbid, this is me telling everyone that he had this realization that this is what people will remember me for. This is the guy who's incredibly wealthy at the time. He's making dynamites and all sorts of bombs at the time that was needed for mining and all those operations. And he was the wealthiest man probably on the planet at the time. And he had this epiphany that after all, this is what humanity will remember me for. So, in the same way, one thought that I can leave your audience with is take yourself in that room thinking that you are dead, and what will people remember you for, or what will people remember you by? It's not morbid, it's being realistic. And
Yeah.
in that moment, when you go back and see yourself, reflect that this is what people would remember you by, then come back and change it because that's your moment. This is your moment today to make that moment. And this is not me saying that leadership legacy has to be about statues and naming buildings and roads on your name. It's about leaving this world a better place.
Yeah.
That's everyone's duty. That's everyone's obligation. You and I, people of color, we are living this independence, this freedom, this liberty in the whole world. I did not earn it. I did not do anything, not even a single sweat of blood that I had to pay for to earn this freedom and liberty today. It was gift to me for the people and the leaders who had this vision far back than my own life. So the question is, what am I going to leave for this world? And if I can't answer that, then take yourself to that room where you're dead tomorrow and see what will people remember you for.
Yeah, absolutely. Beyond this, I think nothing more can be said. I'm sure all those who've been very interestedly, who will be very interestedly listening to this conversation I'm sure this will be a reflection point for them. And thank you so much, Dave. It's just been very encouraging to hear how purpose is something, and to lead a purpose-driven life. It doesn't matter when that comes to you, but it doesn't matter if you've gone through 40 years of your life without the purpose, but at some point, when that comes to you, I think it's worth it. And always, I think it's very important to have that impact that you leave behind. So thank you so much, Dave. I've really genuinely enjoyed this conversation with you.
I've equally enjoyed this conversation, and it's been a pleasure.